Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, good morning to you.
Morning, fellas. How's it going today?
Good. How was the weekend?
It was nice. It was beautiful weather. I actually was in D.C. for the weekend. I usually don't stay here, but it was nice. I hear it got a little torrential rain and stuff there.
We didn't get too much. We had a good soaking, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, we did have that.
Maybe that's it, a good soaking.
What kind of temps do you have in Washington still?
It's today will be in the mid to upper 60s. It's typically about 15 degrees warmer than Illinois, is how I put it. And when it snows, it usually melts in a couple days. So a little bit more temperate, but it still gets you still get a nice winter out here. That's for sure.
Lots to get. There's always lots to get to. I don't know why I say that. You guys have a speaker, which is new. Paul Ryan, a guy who had been on the record many, many times before saying, look, I don't even really want this job. I'm happy with Ways and Means. I like going home on weekends. I like being with my family. I don't want to be speaker. Had enough people get into his ear and convince him this was the best thing for the party, the best thing for the caucus. And he now leads the House. I know you were supportive of him last time we talked. Despite all the turmoil and McCarthy in and out, is this the best possible outcome for Republicans in the House?
Oh, yeah, I really think so. I mean, look, it's great actually to have a reluctant lawyer in that position. And, at the point he made the decision to run, he's all in. So he's not still a reluctant lawyer. And I think you saw that. And, him speaking to all 5 Sunday shows did a fantastic job of communicating. One of the big criticisms of Speaker Boehner was just that he didn't go out a lot and communicate our position. And, Speaker Boehner's perspective was, hey, I'm the Speaker of the House. It's more of an institutional position and not necessarily the leader of the party. But if you see now, I think Paul Ryan is assuming that mantle, at least until we get a presidential candidate, and he does a great job of communicating. He talks about, bold ideas and everything else. And so, yeah, I think this is the best possible outcome and something that I think, frankly, Republicans ought to be very proud of. And I think, the difference between Nancy Pelosi and the youngest Speaker of the House since, the Civil War is astounding. This is an era of really young folks in the GOP, and it's something that we ought to embrace and be proud of.
So is he looking to give this position a new look, a new definition, that sort of thing?
Yeah, look, he's definitely going to get new carpet because he says it smells like cigarette smoke in his office.
I read that over the weekend. He's going to be sleeping in his own office still, his own house office, because they can't get the stale cigarette smell out of the Speaker's office.
Yeah, no kidding. He'll get basically lung cancer just by the secondhand smoke that's been built in there. So no, it'll be interesting. But yeah, I think he realizes, look, this is a time. He talked to us at one point, and as he made the decision to run, he said, look, I came to realize that in essence the whole shebang, the whole Republican Party was a threat of basically collapsing into a civil war. And just, you guys talk about it, you hear about it, all the factions of the Republican Party are more interested in attacking each other than they are in attacking the real opposition, which are the Democrats. And he saw that, and I think came to realize that he's the only guy, and he doesn't mean that arrogantly, but it's just, for such a time as this, as the Bible says, he's in a unique position that he could unite a flailing, situation, a flailing party. And I think we've seen that. Everybody in the party has kind of agreed to cease fire, to hold out, to let's go on offense, and I think we're going to see, the approval rating of the Republican Party, Congress, and hopefully it's going to help our nominee for president. It's going to be a lot better.
Speaker Boehner had gone on the record a couple of times, or at least had been reported a couple of times. He really wanted to get some sort of comprehensive immigration reform bill done before he left office, before he left the speakership. That did not happen. Paul Ryan apparently has made promises, both in writing and face-to-face with people saying, look, we're not doing any comprehensive immigration reform bill as long as President Obama is in office. I think it's fair to say you were closer to the Speaker's stance on trying to get something done as quickly as possible. Are you comfortable with Paul Ryan making those promises to some members of the caucus?
I think he's a realist. I want immigration reform done, and that starts with serious, comprehensive border security. I've worked the border. I've seen the porous, open it. I think the American people deserve border security. And then a real discussion about all the other issues that are going on, including that we're losing, some of our best people that we train in our universities because we're not keeping them here on high-skilled visas. But, look, there's no doubt the reason we don't have a real discussion on immigration reform right now is because of President Obama. President Obama decided that instead of waiting to see if the Republicans could work with him on some kind of version of immigration reform, he went forward with these illegal executive orders, and that, by the way, were slapped down in the court, and he poisoned the well. So now, look, even among those of us that support immigration reform, I don't see any path forward in the next year, mainly because of President Obama poisoning the well. And so I think Paul Ryan's a realist. You know, look, this has been a problem for 30 years, if not longer than that. It's one we want to fix, but we want to fix it permanently so that in 30 years our kids aren't having to deal with the same issue. And if we have to wait for another year for a different president, hopefully a Republican, but a different president to come forward and actually fix this problem, then realistically, that's what we're going to do.
And it doesn't strike me as being a bad bit of thinking in that the president does have some bit of history here in handing the opposition their lunch when they try to go in and say, all right, let's negotiate, let's talk about this. Well, hey, I won. Here's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. And so, again, something as big as this, something as divisive as immigration, the American people deserve a steady, honest discussion about what we're facing, about what the situation is, and they deserve to participate in the bigger discussion. And I think that's going to be obvious in the presidential race. It'll be an opportunity for the candidates to have their voice heard on it, and for people to have their voice heard on who they vote for. So, look, as much as I want real immigration reform that starts with border security, it's just not realistic now. And one of the great things about Paul Ryan is he's pragmatic and realistic.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger with us here. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. The Bipartisan Budget Act passed last week with all Democrats on board. A minority of the Republicans in the House signed on to support it. You were in support of the Bipartisan Budget Act. Some criticism of it because, among other things, it effectively ends sequestration, which I think was fairly effective in holding down federal spending. We've taken GDP about 25% to about 20% in terms of spending compared to GDP. Sequestration was a big part of that. I know that you have told us previously we need to address military spending, period, because the world has changed since sequestration started. There are more dangerous parts of the world. There are more threats we have to manage. Was it worth to you? Obviously it was. You voted for it. But I guess why was it worth to you to sort of break sequestration, to push off some of those reductions to a decade in the future to get that military spending up front?
Well, I appreciate you asking me about it. It's not an easy vote. No vote like that is easy. And as you know, I'm very pragmatic in saying, look, we have a Democratic president. The Democrats have said, and they have a majority blocking position in the Senate, they have said they will not increase military spending unless we likewise do that with domestic spending. I don't like that position. But I also realize that at this time, as dangerous as the world is, and as a guy that's still in the military, I see every day sequestration is really harming the readiness of our troops. So it's like, okay, well, let's make a bargain here. What we ended up getting out of this, there were some things I didn't like, but some of the things I did like, we got entitlement reform to Social Security, including Social Security disability, making sure that people that don't qualify or people that are on the line of qualifying actually go through the process of being rejected if they don't deserve to be on it. It's part of the reason it's so insolvent. That saves over $158 billion over the long term. But let's look at it this way. When sequestration happened, if you remember, the super committee was supposed to come together. We cut $2 trillion, and the super committee was supposed to come forward and figure out how to cut another $2 trillion. Sequestration was meant to be a result of, if you can't find a way to make the cuts, we're going to come in with this blunt instrument called sequestration. Even when it was enacted, when sequestration came forward because the super committee failed to come to an agreement, we have always said from that beginning that if we have to alleviate sequestration piece by piece and do it small bites, what the super committee failed to do in one big bite, that we would do that. This is in line with the promise of the Budget Control Act of 2011. And it's funny because a lot of the people that opposed this agreement, that said the budget caps were the best thing since sliced bread, all voted against the Budget Control Act of 2011. They voted with Nancy Pelosi against. So it's like, at one point, you can't have voted against the caps, and then on the other hand say that the caps are the best thing that ever happened. So, look, our military deserves this, and it wasn't beautiful, it wasn't perfect, I wish I could have written a different bill, but I don't have that choice. I just get to vote yes or no.
Kind of following on that, you were in the minority of the majority on that vote. And also, I know we've talked previously about the Export-Import Bank, and there was a discharge petition in which there were about 75, 78, somewhere in that range, Republicans on board bringing back Export-Import Bank as well. I know that you are not afraid to take positions that are to the opposite of the majority. You've done that in the past. We've talked about details on that previously. When you are in the minority, though, minority of the Republican Party, does it cause you to second guess or to rethink or to at least think deeper about your position on those topics? I mean, specifically, too, I guess just take these last two issues, export-import and the Budget Act.
Yeah, I think that's great questions. First off, it was a majority of the Republicans that voted to revitalize Ex-Im Bank. It was 127 to 117, so it actually did get a majority of Republicans. In terms of, the issue of this budget agreement, look, I got to tell you, there's probably a majority of people that really wanted this thing to pass but weren't willing to take the vote. And I'm not saying that to disparage anybody, but it's the Vote No, Hope Yes caucus, which are the ones that are worried to vote yes because they're afraid they're going to go home and get a primary, but they really want other people to vote yes for them. So, Look, my filter when I make a decision is not about what's necessarily good for the Republican Party, not what's necessarily good for the establishment. It's what's good for Illinois, the United States, and my district. And so when I take those votes, that's what I do. That's what I filter. And so if I'm the minority of a majority position, but I think it's the right vote to take, I'll do it, even if it means that, I'm putting my political career kind of exposing it, because I'm not doing this for a job. I'm doing this to do the right thing. So, I love the opportunity to talk about it, and I obviously see comments on the internet and stuff too, and I'm aware that there are people that are not happy sometimes with the positions I take. But again, I can look in the mirror and say, on the votes, I'm doing it for the right reason. And even if there's votes I ever regret taking, at the time it wasn't because I was doing it for any personal reason. It was because I thought it was the right thing.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger with us here, Illinois 16th District, Riley and Scot on WROK. Another minute or two, switching gears. The Republican debate last week on CNBC, I'm sure you caught it. There was a total debacle.
Yeah.
The RNC suspending future debates right now with NBC, and the campaigns all got together over the weekend to try to figure things out, how to make things better, clearer, get better moderators, better questions to help serve Republican primary voters. Do you think the RNC was right to suspend that upcoming debate with NBC? How do we get these debates better?
Yeah, I think they were right. I mean, it was obviously totally a gotcha debate. At the same time, I mean, running for president is the big leagues. I mean, it's you've got to expect tough questions. You've got to expect, some level of gotcha questions, and you're going to have to be able to respond to that. And so I think to say, we want, no questions that are gotcha or unfair is unrealistic. But at the same time, if you looked at the Democratic debate and then you looked at the Republican debate, I mean, the difference in questions to these people, it was like to Hillary, why are you so amazing? To Mr. Rubio, why are you the worst person I've ever met in the world? I mean, it's that kind of difference. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's if these Republican candidates come together and say, look, we're not against the hard questions, but we're also not going to jump into a lion's den for absolutely no reason. I think they're right. So, yeah, I think it's time that we start pushing back a little bit on the mainstream media and some of their questioning of our candidates.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. It's nice to see some bite back. It's nice to see the bite back actually happen when the questioning happens instead of later on during a news conference or released through your campaign. You weren't happy about that, and here's the quote from the candidate. I'd rather hear the guy up on stage get pissed off.
Yeah, and if you remember, that's Gingrich kind of got his boost when he did that.
Right.
And but it's hard to do. I mean, I've been in debates before, obviously nothing at that level, but if you get a silly question, it's hard to come together and say, hey, I'm gonna question your question, because you're trying to do well. You're trying to be to project a thing of confidence, like an aura of confidence. But yeah, I mean, it's at some point we've got to fight back and say, look, give us hard questions. We're not against that. It's going to be hard running for president, but let's be realistic here. Let's be fair.
He's Congressman Adam Kinzinger. As always, we appreciate you taking time out of your day for us.
You bet, guys. Take care.